Hello, Helen here. Thanks for joining me for another card in my Christmas 2016 series. This one's going to be done with a Simon Says stamp set called Warm Christmas Wishes, and it's a little bit more appropriate for us warmer countries that don't have a wintry Christmas but have a really hot Christmas. So I'm starting off by getting the stamps that I want to use out of the set and putting them on a piece of card in my MISTI. Now I'm just using the palm tree, the Father Christmas, the drinks table, the ball and the surfboard, and I'm going to stamp them with Memento Tuxedo Black ink, which is an alcohol marker friendly ink, and I'm going to stamp that firstly and then stamp it again where I've missed parts. Once I've got the stamping done, I'm ready to start doing the colouring. Now I'm using what Copics I have where I've got the right colours, and I'm using some other alcohol markers that I've got called Reno Art markers. I'll have a full list of the colours that I've used on my blog, and I'll have a link down below in the video description if you're watching the YouTube video. Now I start off using pretty much most of it. I'm using either 2 colours or 3 colours, and I start off by putting a layer of the lightest colour over and then working my way to the darkest and then back again to the lightest. So if it's just 2 colours, I'm just doing dark colour in the areas that need a bit of shadow, and then I'm just going over it with the lightest colour again just to help do the blending. Now there really isn't anything fancy with the colouring. I'm pretty newbie at this alcohol marker colouring blending, so I've kept it fairly basic. I have sped up the film quite a bit because the video was looking quite long, and I apologise for that. There's quite a few components to the card, so I've cut bits out where I've just been doing an area just so that you can see the next stage and the next stage. So I'll put on a little bit of Christmas music while you watch me continue doing the colouring, and as soon as I finish the colouring I'll be back to tell you the next step. Once the colouring's done, I've fussy cut them all out right to the black line. So I've just got this last one, the Father Christmas, to do, so I'm going to cut that out. And then once I've done that, I've gone around all of the images with a black pen on the edge, just to take away any white parts where I've missed cutting the scissors, and it just neatens the whole thing up. Now that I've got my images done, I'm going to get the card ready. So I've got a card base and a front panel that's exactly the same size, and I've cut an aperture out with a Simon Says stamp stitch rectangle to make a frame, and I'm going to put a fine red line on the inside of that frame. So I'm going to use the same die, and I'm going to use the inside edge of the die as my guide to make sure that I've got the same even amount around the inside frame. So I'm using a craft knife and the die, and I'm just cutting very carefully down the edge of each of the sides, making sure I don't move it until I've cut out a new aperture out of the red card. I go back and make sure that I've trimmed it correctly with a craft knife and a metal ruler, and once I've finished that, it fits perfectly. Once the red frame's aperture's cut out, I'm just marking with a pencil just on the inside of my white frame, drawing pencil lines where I want to cut, and then cutting it out with scissors. That should ensure that the red frame's just a little bit underneath the white frame and can't be seen. Then I'm putting double-sided tape around it and just pulling one side off, making sure that I've got it nice and straight before I pull the rest of the double-sided tape off. That ensures that it's all straight and staying put. And then I'm going to put foam tape on the back of that. And I'm going to have that raised on the card, so that's that part ready. The next thing I'm going to do is create a sky in sand. So I've got 2 pieces of Tim Holtz watercolour paper here, and I'm just going to cut out a little sort of half curved piece at the bottom for the sand. Now I do go back and cut another piece out so that I've got 2 layers of the sand. But I'm also going to create a sky, so I'm using a piece of post-it note, and I'm cutting some scallops in the top just to resemble clouds, and I'm going to start sponging with Distress Tumbled Glass ink using a mini blender, and I'm just going to just very lightly go over the more or less stencil that I've made, and just lightly put in some blue into the sky. Now you'll see when I take off the post-it that it's very bright white, but you just make sure that when you do the next cloud underneath, you sponge just very lightly some blue over that, and it just takes the harshness of the white away. Really, I'm just starting at the top and working my way down, just alternating the cloud stencil just in different angles to try and make the sky as natural as possible. And I just work my way all the way down to the bottom. I'm also doing some Distress ink blending on the 2 sand pieces. Now I've used antique linen for the base colour, and I'm just sponging that on and using a piece of scratch card to keep my fingers off it, stop leaving fingerprints. And then I'm going to go back and just use a tiny little bit of scattered straw distress ink just to yellow it up a little bit, as the antique linen I think looks a little bit on the sort of green tinge to it, but scattered straw's quite a strong colour, so you need to just use it very sparingly. The next step is to start putting my card together, so I'm going to stick down the sky onto my card base with some double-sided tape, and then I've stuck the sand pieces down, the first one just slightly raised on some foam tape, and then the second one glued on top of that just straight with some liquid glue, and then I'm sticking down my frame on top of all of those. Now before I put all my coloured images onto the card, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I'm just laying a couple of the taller pieces down roughly about where I'm going to put them on the card so that I can see where I can place my sentiment. The sentiment's out of the same stamp set saying Warm Christmas Wishes, and I'm stamping it with VersaFine Onyx black ink with a acrylic block. Now that I've stamped the sentiment, I can stick all the elements onto the card where I want them. So I'm using a combination of foam tape and liquid glue and just overlapping the frame slightly with the palm trees, but the rest are going to sit inside the frame area. The last thing I've done to finish off the card is I've put some glossy accents onto his sunglasses, and then I'm using a bit of Wink Stella and I'm just putting a little bit of sparkle on his Christmas hat, the beach ball, and also the drinks container. That's the card finished today. I'll see you next week with another card in my series. Bye for now.